I want this rebuild to accomplish many things, but I definitely want it to accomplish this. Stop making me think what could have been when I see a player the White Sox should have signed perform well in the playoffs.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan. I've been podcasting here for over a year and a half and covering the team well before then. And also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, I keep having this feeling of what could have been for the White Sox as I watch this postseason. George Springer's dramatic 3-run home run last night was just the latest example. So let's discuss how hopefully this rebuild cures this problem of the team missing out on great players. And then I'm going to have two segments to go over your mailbag questions and comments. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So obviously, I would love to watch the playoffs and see your Chicago White Sox in it. But since it's going to be a while, I would at least prefer to not watch the playoffs and think, hey, that could have been the White Sox had they actually signed this guy or kept this player, because that's been happening a lot. At least for me, when I keep watching the playoffs, I keep seeing all these former White Sox players thriving in the playoffs. I have had extensive talks about Andrew Vaughn, talked about how owner Jerry Reinsdorf laughed at the idea of pursuing Shohei Ohtani, talked about it on yesterday's show. And then there was George Springer blasting a 3-run homer to send the Blue Jays to the World Series for the first time since 1993. And all I could think was, man, the White Sox missed an opportunity to add him heading into the 2021 season. So how about let's add not missing out on opportunities to add players that actually could complete the rebuild or put the team over the top, to the list of things that this current rebuild has to accomplish. Because that was something that happened to last decade's rebuild. They didn't add that George Springer player. They didn't add that final elite player piece, that all-star player piece that put them over the top. I mean, they went bargain bin shopping. Yeah, Dallas Keuchel won a Cy Young, but he was well removed from those Cy Young days. And Springer was supposed to be that big-ticket free agent signing to complete last decade's rebuild. But instead, he signs with the Blue Jays for 6 years and $150 million. So instead of having Springer's big bat in that lineup, the White Sox went the Band-Aid route again with their outfield back in 2021 when they signed Adam Eaton to play right field. Basically, the same old Band-Aid fix that they tried ever since Jermaine Dye retired in 2009. That's how long the White Sox have been trying to find a long-term option in right field. It remains an eternal problem to this day. And don't get me wrong, I love Mike Tauchman, but when he has been the best player the White Sox have had there since Dye hung up his cleats, I mean, you could make a case that Adam Eaton, I think he mostly played, he played all over the place, but really, like, when you got a professional true at bat where it's like, hey, it's okay if you bring him back next year. That speaks to how big of a problem right field has been for this organization. Now, hopefully, Brandon Montgomery fixes it. But Springer could have easily filled that hole for a few seasons and then eventually transitioned to an effective DH, kind of like what he's done with the Blue Jays. And also, he would have completed last decade's rebuild. I want to share this nugget that MLB.com's Matt Kelly wrote back on December 9th of 2020. This is what he writes. It would be tempting to say the White Sox are already wrapping up a successful offseason. Hindsight, little editorial before I keep reading. Hindsight being 2020. It was a terrible offseason. Back to the article there. They added a top 10 starting pitcher by trading for Lance Lynn and filled their right field hole by agreeing to terms with Adam Eaton, according to a source. Add one top shelf reliever, Liam Hendricks or Brad Hand, to replace free agent Alex Colomé, and general manager Rick Hahn could wake up Christmas morning having crossed off the 3 biggest items on his shopping list. But, ... why should the White Sox stop there? Truth be told, there's one more acquisition that could place the Southsiders firmly in the American League Central Division driver's seat. That last big piece, George Springer. Couldn't Springer, a projected 4-win player in 2021, be the difference maker in that 3-team gridlock? Chicago could be adding Springer's elite offense, a top 10 major league bat by several metrics, to the AL's second best scoring team from 20, with his bat representing a huge upgrade from Adam Engel. Hahn and his staff would need to shuffle some chairs and go bargain hunting in the relief market to make a Springer signing work, but after already making an all-in move by trading for Lynn, shouldn't the White Sox keep going? Contention windows can be incredibly fleeting. The Sox can ask the crosstown Cubs about that, but Springer could give the Southsiders a chance to become a pennant contenders, not just the AL Central hopefuls. I couldn't stop but laughing. I mean, all-in move to get Lance Lynn. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love what Lance Lynn did in 2021. And, I love his personality, but that wasn't an all-in move. That was, again, adding a nice number 2, number 3 starter, as it turned out. But it wasn't like, hey, you went out and got Corbin Burns, like what Baltimore tried to do at least. And, lo and behold, Liam Hendricks was the big signing. Bargain bin shopping. I mean, that's basically what they did the entire 2 off seasons that they were trying to contend. And the White Sox did stop after adding Lance Lynn. And while Springer didn't miss a lot of time in 2021, and the White Sox did win the AL Central that year, you at least got to give them credit for that. In the long run, basically stopping just short of adding that elite player, basically sent the team into a tailspin of mediocre play. They went back to being mired in mediocrity, and then they went to historically awful in the long run. And this rebuild has to avoid that. And I know Jerry will still own the team for at least 3 more years, but hopefully as we get closer to that 2029 takeover, Justin Ishbia can influence Jerry just enough to provide the necessary financial resources to add a player of Springer's caliber when he hits the free agent market, a player of that caliber. And I know some of you are going to come in and say, that we're like, hey, we avoided that potential bad contract, even though, again, he went on to have 3 good seasons, and he's having a decent season this year, and hit probably one of the biggest home runs in Toronto history outside of Joe Carter's Game 7 walk-off, in 1993. You just want to make sure that you add a player of Springer's caliber when he hits the market, even though he was 31 and you were right-handed heavy, you needed that elite player. And I am hopeful Kyle Teal and Colson Montgomery and Edgar Carroll and Grant Taylor and Shane Smith become all-star players, along with hopefully guys like Braden Montgomery and Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith and Caleb Bonemer and Billy Carlson and Jaden Foskey joining them in that tier someday. And maybe Rock Chowalski or Justin LeBron if the White Sox win the 1st or 2nd pick next year. But it's going to be a little bit of time before you wait for that to happen. And they're going to need to add that elite player to put the team over the top at some point. All rebuilds demand it. And it can't be in the bargain bin section. It can't just be Lance Lynn, Dallas Keuchel, and Yasmani Grandal type players. It has to be superstar players, all-star players, like consistent all-star players, 3 to 6 F4 type players, players that will be typically playing in the playoffs and meeting the moment in the playoffs. That means this front office is going to have to meet the moment of getting those players at some point. Well, it's Tuesday, and this is the day that I always want to make sure your voice is at least read. So let's do 2 segments of Talk You Off Tuesday, with the first addressing Luis Robert Jr. and what to do with Lenine Sosa after the break. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet. Put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel gives you so many ways to play. You can build parlays. You can try player props. You can even follow the live lines during the games. And FanDuel makes watching football even more exciting when you got a little something riding on the action. And I've always been saying, FanDuel's traditional money lines, the over-unders, and the spreads are fun to play. But if you want to win big money or at least double or triple your cash, play the parlays, the props, or the futures. So, for example, you want to see Los Angeles' AFC team crush Minnesota on Thursday? Well, plus 380 for LA to beat Skull by 14 or more points. If you put $10 on that, and if it hits, you'll have nearly quadrupled your money. And say Minnesota achieves the blowout of winning by 14 or more points. That is at plus 700. So $10 on that. And if it does happen, that pays out $70. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. So let's be honest. Most of us can't even name all our financial accounts, let alone what we're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track. And that can mean you're leaving money on the table. And that's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. It's helped me organize my accounts, track my spending, and get a better handle on my investments without ever touching a spreadsheet. And Monarch's visual dashboards and smart tools makes it so much easier to understand where my money's going and how to make it work harder for me. And my wife, she loves Monarch because it makes doing the budget so easy and less stressful. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, you can get the audio version of the show on places such as Apple or Spotify. So make sure to follow or subscribe at wherever you get your audio podcasts. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me and maybe some hope. Also, make sure to check out my written content at SouthsideSox.com and OnTapSportsNet.com. All right, so my guy Maverick is steamed at Luis Robert Jr. And that's what I want to lead off this week's Talk You Off Tuesday. Again, I want to do two segments because I got a couple of comments and questions I want to get to. And one of the other questions I do want to get to is about Lenine Sosa. So my guy Maverick, an elite everydayer that I really appreciate. And I'm going to try to get this up if it would work. And the graphic isn't working for me. Well, that's not nice. Either way, this is what he writes. Comfortable. Let's talk about comfortable. Luis Prima Donna Robert. That's comfortable. A 220 hitter making $20 million and is hurt pretty frequent. Again, I wanted to show for those that were watching on YouTube. There it is. Hey, there we go. That's what Maverick wrote on one of the episode pages on YouTube. Again, feel free to always leave comments on the YouTube page. And first of all, again, I was saying they should have traded him for pennies on the dollar at the trade deadline because that's what the market is screaming as prices. And I think it's always going to be what they're going to scream at. Even if he has a great first half next year, I still see teams saying, well, he's been hurt most of the time. I can't trust that he's going to make it through beyond 100, 110 games. I'm just not giving you a blue chip prospect. I may give you a top 30 prospect, but I'm not giving you that timeline accelerating trade. And think about this too. Luis Robert Jr. is basically only has value, like at least $20 million worth of value or even $15 million worth of value, only to the White Sox. To everybody else, he's a rental player. I mean, think about it. If the White Sox did pay him his $2 million buyout, do you think he's getting a $20 million option from any other team, a $20 million this year? No, he's not going to get $20 million in 2026. He's probably looking at 5+ incentives, kind of like what Yohan Moncada and Tim Anderson have gotten in the past. But the White Sox, they're willing to pay him $20 million, despite 2 seasons of injuries and mediocre production, because, well, this GM is chasing a white whale trade package. This is his Moby package there. He's going to give him a $5 million raise because just call Chris Getz Ishmael. Because he still thinks that 2023 LRJ is in there. And if it does appear, that he can get that timeline accelerating rebuild trade package. Now, the only reason why it kind of makes a little sense, even though it's way overvalued, that the White Sox are going to give him a $5 million raise is the White Sox do need somebody to play center field next year that can at least prevent runs and take away runs. And Luis Robert Jr. can do that. And he does run the base as well, and he gives you a little bit of pop. So that's probably why he's getting $20 million. And the reason why they can do it is since there's no long-term solution and there's really no bad money on the books outside of Andrew Benintendi's contract, and that's the only other guaranteed contract that they have, I got no problem with them rolling the dice one more time, but I also think, maybe there's a chance. He's got to stay healthy, and that's the biggest issue. But I do think the young guys in the clubhouse have started to re-energize LRJ. And I don't think he's a prima donna. I'll respectfully disagree with Maverick there, because also, why was he going over the comfort? This was in the context of, Chris Lanuti from Sox in the Basement when he was on the show saying Andrew Vaughn got comfortable and basically didn't need to work so hard. I will, though, say I see your point, Maverick, of saying, maybe Luis Robert Jr. has gotten comfortable and maybe he's not working as hard as he should. I don't know. I'm not there all the time. I'm, at all, pretty much. I don't have a press pass, that type of thing. And I do see how maybe he could be getting comfortable when they paid him when they probably shouldn't have. I mean, it was a slippery slope as a talent scream superstar player. And this owner, it likes cost certainty, at least, on his terms. And you did see it in 2023, but did it leave him in a spot where maybe he's not going to be as hungry, and it also left them with no ability to hold him accountable with, like, say, the demotion card, like the White Sox played with Vaughn. However, I think also the losing got to Luis Robert Jr. more than anything. I mean, you see yourself producing in 2023 while everyone else is basically mailing it in. And I'm sure he was sort of like, okay, whatever then. So prima donna, I politely disagree, because when I think of prima donna, and maybe it's just a difference of who we think prima donnas are, because I think Yoan Moncada was more of a prima donna than LRJ. Then Ardan, he left this question on X, formerly Twitter, after I wrote about Munetake Murakami likely not coming to the White Sox. This is at RD Aurelio. He writes, 10 for 225 is insane. Just for context, that was kind of, I put in a piece that I wrote for when I was briefly writing for the Fans First network about that was the rumor that he might be getting in free agency. So 10 for 225 is insane. I'd rather have Alonso or Naylor for half the years and money. Sox need to clear up their infield ASAP. Colson is the only lock at SS, in my opinion. Who are the corners? What is the plan for Sosa? So, hey, I would love for Josh Naylor to be signed just as much as I would love Munetake Murakami. I mean, I'm not going to say no just because I would love for Naylor to stop destroying the White Sox. And I think Josh Naylor at least has a few more productive years during, still your bridge years of this rebuild. So it would be great to have him. In terms of the corners, if you're asking for just 2026, what are they going to do next season? Right now, I think you are looking at a rotation of Miguel Vargas and Curtis Mead at third, and a rotation of Vargas, Mead, and Lenine Sosa at first. I think they're going to go for that positional versatility that they have. I think it's just going to be running it back when they keep talking about internal improvement. Now, if you're thinking long-term, like if you're thinking what's the next good team, hopefully by 2027 or 2028, gosh, I hope it's no longer than 2029. If you're thinking long-term, I keep saying Colson will eventually get pushed off of short because of Billy Carlson, this year's first-round pick. That glove is elite. But again, it's 3 or 4 years from now. So let's say it's 2028, 2029. I think you got Colson at third. You got Billy Carlson at short. Then first, maybe it's Caleb Bonamur or Colson. I mean, they're both big guys to play, first base. And then I think Sam Antonacci is likely starting at second over Chase Maidroth. That because I think Antonacci has that better bat to ball skills than Maidroth. They both are going to be guys that are not going to be hitting for a ton of power, but they've got a really good hit skill set. And I think Antonacci's shown that he might have a little bit better at the big league level. Now for Sosa, this is, at least in the short term, I think they got to focus on him working on his defense at first and still at second, because he did earn the right to be rotated into the lineup again. He did earn the right to be back next season. But I think all options have to be on the table in regards to trading him. Maybe you bundle him with Davis Martin to get that center fielder of the future, or upgrade at first or in the rotation. So I think just basically everything has to be on the table for Lenine Sosa. He's earned the right to come back, but his value may never be this high. Well, I got a couple more questions and comments to tackle, including one about Andrew Vaughn being comfortable on the south side. So let's tackle that after the break. There's nothing like catching a baseball game live, the energy, the crowd, the chance to see your team in person, but actually getting tickets, that's the tough part. Queues, login screens, surprise fees. It takes all the fun out of it. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. Think about it. Fees are included. You're going to know your total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Now, how many times have you thought, hey, I'm getting a great deal to this show, to this concert, to this sporting event, only to get to the checkout and see that deal vanish under a pile of fees? That doesn't happen at Game Time. Honestly, Game Time is faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I've bought tickets. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show's available on all major podcast platforms. So I've seen this comment from everydayers that I want to tackle. And then, yes, there is a world where there are people who actually do apologize for Jerry Reinsdorf. So those are a couple of comments that I want to tackle in the second segment of Talk You Off Tuesday. So, Johnny J. Doe 8319, he left this comment on the YouTube channel in regards to, I think, a short I did. Hey, if you're on a bleep team like the White Sox, and again, we're very G-rated here. Anyways, like the White Sox, losing constantly would get you comfortable too. Or consistently, I'm sorry. Losing consistently would get you comfortable too. All right, so I've actually seen this version of this comment a few times. And the only reason why I'm kind of pushing back on when I see it, and I don't really comment on the YouTube channel, but I kind of feel like I want to address it here, is Andrew Vaughn was drafted to raise the team up. I mean, he was the third overall pick in 2019. Part of the tanking towards the end of the rebuild, towards the beginning of the rebuild, was meant to get premium players, kind of like the Cubs got. They were ripping a page out of what the Cubs and the Orioles were doing. They were supposed to get guys like Javier Baez and Chris Bryant, and Kyle Schwarber. That was the point of tanking, to make sure you're not losing, that these guys are cornerstone pieces that raise your talent floor to that sixth WAR player, to be that focal piece of your lineup, to be your Robin Ventura and your Frank Thomas type impact players. And he was supposed to be a part of this team actually winning. And his struggles at the plate in April and May of 2024 and last season did actually contribute to this team losing 100 games. It was part of what you put on the list of reasons of why this team lost an historic amount of games in 2024 and then had their third straight 100-loss season for the first time in franchise history. So I guess I would actually argue that he played a role in helping this team lose consistently, more than just being the victim of it. So I think that's where I'm coming from, is we're trying to make him, when I see this comment, it makes him almost seem to be like this victim of the White Sox. And he wasn't a victim. And I get there's Vaughn truthers out there that want to make him out to be this victim. The only thing the White Sox, I think, did horribly wrong was, and again, it was circumstances, was they just rushed him to the big leagues too long. But you saw him be productive enough to be a contributing piece. And he could never take the next step from being contributor to cornerstone. So he's not a victim. I'm sorry. I will disagree with that. And then I got two comments regarding ownership. One from my guy, Don Berta, and another one from Chris. Don Berta puts this comment. I got it up for those watching on YouTube. I thought it was funny when you said pro Jerry Reinsdorf people. Those could only be Cubs fans. And then Chris, he comments, hopefully new owner spends some money on new park experience and players. Hopefully payroll can get over $100 million in a few years. And the reason why I want to tackle this is I do think sometimes we actually have to take a step back and realize that Jerry Reinsdorf is a bad owner. He's not a bad person. So, when there is the pro Jerry crowd and they're out there, I think we kind of have to also do the whole 360. And I get it, Jerry's not earned it. And I'm not saying this to curry favor with the organization, but I do think sometimes we all have to kind of just and I know that's not what Don was trying to get at, but I think sometimes we kind of look at it that they're like, nobody should be supporting Jerry. Nobody would think that he's doing a good job. And he's a bad owner. And I think sometimes even I get into that where I let my frustration get the best of me. And then when I do see the pro Jerry comments, I think, why are you defending this guy? And maybe it could be just bots and burners, who knows? But at the same time, at least the human level, there are stories of Jerry being a very charitable, very loyal man. So maybe that's where you get people supporting him. And while I do say the loyalty is one of the things that actually makes him a bad owner, as he keeps people in positions of power around way too long. And also that has allowed the White Sox and the Bulls to become very insular in their thinking. You can see how that builds up some goodwill. And I do want to make it clear, Jerry, the human being, sounds like a solid citizen from whatever I hear. When I was at, Podfest, I went out to the 108, was sitting with some of the guys, and one of the guys brought up a story that he met Jerry at some event in Arizona. He said Jerry was a lovely guy. Talked to him for a little while, took a picture, was talking cigars with him. I mean, that. So Jerry, the owner, though, he's a misguided soul too. I mean, he's a bad owner, but I also think he's misguided in that he's pining for, and I think that's what leads to these issues. He's pining for an era of baseball that's just never coming back. He's pining to his childhood of when he grew up loving the Brooklyn Dodgers and got his heart broken when they left for Los Angeles, and he just can't get past it. And that's what I think the frustration is. He needs to sell to an owner who's willing to accept the modern economics of baseball. And that's kind of why I lumped in Chris's comment. Although, Chris, I agree with you fully. Let's get, whether it's either a new ballpark or build up Comiskeyville, because right field is still a very functional, very usable ballpark. It just needs some of those things that, the teams are using to add more revenue streams. And you can maybe develop one of the parking lots, although, having the tailgating is nice and that type of stuff. But I want to suggest, let's have a payroll beyond 150 million. When you say 150, I want to shoot for 250, 300 million. Let's compete with the Dodgers when Justin Ishbia takes over. I keep saying, let's hope for it all. Let's have those massive payrolls that gives you a chance to win. That's all those payrolls do, is they give you an opportunity. You still got to play the games and you still got to win, but it gives you those opportunities to have those elite, winning players, and then a farm system of prospects that other teams want, so you can keep adding elite talent through trades. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night until World Series champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or listen to your podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow with a Way Back Wednesday segment. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion on the episode page on YouTube via email, lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com, X, formerly Twitter, @LockedOnSox or @ToddJDub. Also, make sure to like today's episode on YouTube. Leave a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel @Locked On White Sox, or wherever you get your audio podcasts only. And have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.